I never thought turning 28 would be the day my entire life would split in two. There I was standing in my best friend's backyard, with fairy lights twinkling overhead, and a secret growing inside me that I could not wait to share. My fiancé Derek and I had been together for 3 years, and I had spent 2 weeks hugging this beautiful secret to my chest. The pregnancy test had shown 2 pink lines, exactly 14 days before my birthday, and I knew immediately how I wanted to tell everyone. A party surrounded by the people we loved, most a little gift box with ultrasound photos inside the perfect moment. But Derek had been distant lately, coming home late from work, texting Les's kisses landing on my forehead instead of my lips. I told myself it was just stress from his job at the marketing firm downtown. I had no idea what was actually coming. Before I tell you what happened, when I opened that gift box in front of everyone I loved, I want to know where you are watching this from. Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you have ever had someone blindside you just when you thought everything was perfect, go ahead and hit that like button, because you are going to want to hear how this story ends. Do not forget to subscribe, because trust me, what happened next changed everything. Now, let me take you back to that morning, the day I thought would be the happiest of my life. The morning of my birthday party arrived with golden June sunlight streaming through my bedroom window. I woke up early, my hand instinctively moving to my stomach, still flat but holding the most precious secret. I whispered good morning to the tiny life inside me, just like I had done every morning since finding out. The venue was all set at my best friend's place, this gorgeous backyard in suburban Portland, with enough space for the 30 people I had invited. I spent the morning running errands, picking up the custom cake from the bakery on Morrison Street, the one with delicate buttercream flowers that had cost more than I wanted to admit. Hidden in my purse was the tiny gift box wrapped in silver paper containing 3 ultrasound photos and a onesie that read, "Coming soon." Derek had stayed at his apartment the night before. We did not live together yet, something I had wanted to change after the wedding we had planned for next spring. He had texted me around 7 in the morning, just 2 words with no emoji or heart. "See you tonight." It felt cold, but I pushed the unease away, convincing myself he was probably planning his own surprise. Maybe he had secretly bought the ring upgrade I had mentioned months ago, or booked the honeymoon to Costa Rica we had been dreaming about. I was so focused on my own joy that I explained away every red flag waving right in front of my face. My mother called while I was driving to pick up bags of ice, her voice bright with excitement. She asked about Derek, whether he was treating me well, if he seemed happy about our future together. I defended him, automatically painting a picture of a devoted partner who was just busy with a demanding job. The lie tasted bitter even as I spoke it, but I had become so good at making excuses for him that I barely noticed anymore. I told her I loved her and that I would see her at the party. She said she had a feeling this birthday was going to be special, that she could sense something wonderful was coming. She had no idea how right and how wrong she was at the same time. By 4 in the afternoon, I was at my best friend Jenna's house, helping string up the last of the decorations. The backyard looked magical, with white string lights crisscrossing overhead, tables covered in crisp linen, and mason jars filled with wildflowers. Music played softly from speakers, hidden among the garden plants, some indie playlist that Jenna had spent hours curating. My other close friends, Colette and Marcus, arrived early to help, both of them buzzing with energy and asking if I was excited. I was practically vibrating with anticipation, one hand constantly drifting to my cardigan pocket, where I kept the little silver box, making sure it was still there, still real. Guests started arriving right at 6, filling the space with laughter and warm hugs. Everyone brought gifts and cards, their faces bright with genuine affection. but Derek was not there. 6 came and went. 6:30 passed. I checked my phone obsessively, seeing nothing. No text explaining he was running late. No call saying he was stuck in traffic. By the time he finally showed up at 6:45, I had gone through every emotion from worried to angry to relieved. He walked into the backyard, looking freshly showered, his hair still damp, wearing cologne that I definitely had not bought him. It was expensive, smelling something woody and complex, nothing like the drugstore brand he usually wore. When he reached me, he kissed my cheek quickly, barely making contact, his eyes sliding away from mine, like I was too bright to look at directly. He greeted everyone else with this loud, over-the-top enthusiasm, slapping Marcus on the back and complimenting Colette on her dress. Then he grabbed a beer from the cooler and drank half of it in 3 long gulps. I watched him, this man I thought I knew completely, and felt like I was looking at a stranger wearing his face. He got another beer, then another, his laughter getting louder and sharper with each drink, his movements becoming loose and uncoordinated. I tried to catch his eye several times, wanting to share a private smile, some acknowledgement that we were in this together. But he avoided me like I was furniture, just another object in the space. My stomach twisted with something that was not morning sickness, a deeper kind of nausea that came from knowing something was very wrong, but not knowing what. Still I kept smiling, kept playing the role of happy birthday girl, kept touching that little box in my pocket and imagining the moment I would finally share our news. I kept thinking that once I made the announcement, once he understood what we had created together, everything would shift back to normal. He would remember why he loved me. He would remember what we were building together. As the sun started setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Jenna brought out the cake candles already lit and flickering. Everyone gathered around their phones out to record the moment, singing happy birthday in that slightly off-key way that groups always do. I stood in front of them, all my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. This was it, the moment I had been planning for 2 weeks. I was going to blow out the candles, make a wish, and then reach into my pocket for that silver box. I was going to tell them about the baby, about the future, about the family Derek and I were starting. But before I could even take a breath to blow out the candles, Derek stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the patio stones. He swayed slightly, steadying himself on the table edge, and said, in a voice too loud for the quiet moment, "Wait, I want to go first. I have a gift for Harper." Everyone turned to look at him, some people smiling with anticipation, others exchanging quick glances that I caught but did not understand. Marcus looked concerned, his eyebrows drawing together, but he did not say anything. Derek pulled out a box from behind his back, where he must have been hiding it. The wrapping was beautiful, expensive-looking paper in deep blue, with a perfect silver bow on top. The world seemed to slow down as I took the box from his hands. My fingers trembled, not from excitement anymore, but from something my body understood before my mind caught up. Everyone had gone quiet, watching, some of them filming on their phones, because they thought this was going to be a romantic moment worth capturing. I thought maybe he had bought me jewellery, or perhaps he knew about the pregnancy somehow, and this was his way of celebrating. I pulled at the bow and it came loose easily. The paper fell away. Inside was a plain white gift box, the kind you get from department stores. I lifted the lid. Sitting on top of white tissue paper was a folded piece of notebook paper, the kind torn from a spiral-bound pad, with the ragged edge still attached. Next to it was a key, his apartment key that I recognized from the keychain I had given him last Christmas. And there was my toothbrush, the purple one I kept at his place, just sitting there like trash. My hand started shaking for real now. I picked up the note and unfolded it, reading the words silently first, hoping I was misunderstanding. hoping this was some joke I was not getting. The handwriting was definitely his, that messy scrawl I had seen on birthday cards and grocery lists. It read, "I am leaving you. You are useless and deserve better. Do not contact me." 11 words that made absolutely no sense, strung together. I read them 3 times trying to find some other meaning, some hidden message that would make this okay. But there was nothing else. Just those words, cold and final, written in blue ink on cheap paper. I looked up at Derek and he was staring at me with this expression I had never seen before, something between defiance and guilt and something else I could not name. The silence stretched out painfully. Then he laughed this harsh sound that did not match his face and said, "Come on, it is a joke. Read it out loud." But his eyes were not joking. His eyes were already gone, already checked out, already done with me, and this relationship and this life we had supposedly been building together. Some of our friends laughed nervously, picking up on his cue, thinking maybe this was some elaborate prank that would have a sweet payoff. Marcus said, uncertainly, "Dude, that is harsh even for a joke." But Derek's face shifted, then the fake smile dropping away completely, leaving behind something cold and true. He said loud enough for everyone to hear every word clear, despite the alcohol in his system, "I am done. 3 years was enough. You are sweet, Harper, but you are boring. You want marriage and babies, and I want to actually live." The words hit me like physical blows. Marriage and babies. He said it like they were prison sentences. Meanwhile, I was standing there pregnant with his child, the announcement box still in my pocket, the ultrasound photos of our daughter that he would never meet. The irony was so sharp it could have drawn blood. Everyone was staring now, the phone still recording, capturing every second of my humiliation for posterity. Jenna rushed to my side, her hand on my arm, but I held up my other hand to stop her from speaking. I had a choice in that moment. I could cry, which is what my body wanted to do, tears already burning behind my eyes. I could scream at him, tell him about the pregnancy, try to use our baby as a weapon to hurt him back. I could fall apart right there in front of 30 people and let him see exactly how much power he had to destroy me. Or I could do something else entirely. Something he would never expect from boring, useless Harper who just wanted marriage and babies. I smiled. Not a fake smile, not a brave smile, but a genuine smile that came from some deep place inside me that was already doing calculations, already moving forward, already leaving him behind. I said, my voice steady and calm, "Okay, thank you for letting me know." Derek's face went slack with confusion. This was not the reaction he had scripted in whatever cruel fantasy he had been playing out in his head. He had wanted tears, wanted begging, wanted me to fight for him, so he could feel important and desired, even as he destroyed me. I continued, still smiling, still calm. "You are right. I do want those things. Marriage and babies, and a stable life. And I deserve someone who wants them too. Someone who does not think love is boring." I handed him back the key and the toothbrush, placing them carefully in his palm. "You forgot these. Keep the note, though. I think you will need to remember you wrote it someday." The friends who had been laughing stopped. The whole backyard had gone silent, except for the music still playing from the speakers, some cheerful song that was completely wrong for the moment. Derek stumbled through, trying to justify himself, his words slurring together. He said he had been seeing someone else, a woman named Shayna from his gym, that they had been together for 2 months. 2 months, which meant he had been cheating on me since April, since before I got pregnant, since back when I still thought we were happy. He said Shayna was fun, that she did not try to tie him down, that she understood him in ways I never did. Each word he spoke made me more certain that I had dodged a bullet, that this horrible moment was actually a gift I did not know I needed, I said simply, "I hope she makes you happy, Derek." And I meant it. Not because I was a saint, not because I had forgiven him, but because his happiness, or lack of it, was no longer my concern. He was already a stranger to me, already irrelevant to the life I was going to build. He stood there for another moment, maybe waiting for me to break down, maybe hoping I would give him the satisfaction of knowing he had wounded me. When I just looked at him calmly, he turned and walked away, stumbling slightly as he went, leaving through the side gate without saying goodbye to anyone else. The second he was gone, the backyard erupted in shocked voices, everyone talking at once, some people angry on my behalf, others asking if I was okay. I held up both hands and asked them all to please stay, to please not let him ruin the party. I walked to the cake, the candles burned down to nubs now, and relit them with a lighter Jenna handed me. I blew them out without making a wish, because I did not need wishes anymore. I needed plans. I cut the cake myself, served slices to everyone, and forced myself to eat a piece, even though it tasted like sawdust in my mouth. The party continued in this strange, subdued way, people trying to act normal, trying to celebrate, but the joy had leaked out of the evening like air from a punctured tire. I kept the little silver box in my pocket, the pregnancy announcement that would never happen, at least not tonight, not like this. I smiled and chatted and thanked people for coming, playing the role of someone who was fine, someone who was handling this with grace. And in a weird way, I was fine. Shocked, yes. Hurt, absolutely. But underneath the pain was something else, something that felt almost like relief. After the last guest left, only Jenna and Colette remained, helping me clean up plates and cups in silence. We worked for maybe 20 minutes before I finally sat down on the patio steps and started crying. Not the pretty tears from movies, but the ugly gasping kind that hurt your chest and made your face swell. But I was not crying about Derek, not really. I was crying because I was terrified. Terrified of being a single mother, of doing this alone, of my child growing up without a father because he chose a gym fling over us. Jenna sat down next to me, and Colette on the other side, both of them quiet, letting me cry without trying to fix it. When I finally caught my breath, I told them. I pulled the silver box from my pocket and opened it, showing them the ultrasound photos, the tiny blob that would become my daughter. Their faces went through shock, then understanding, then this fierce protective love that made me cry all over again, but for a different reason. Colette said, "Does he know?" And I shook my head. No, he did not know, and he was never going to know. He had made his choice. He had walked away. The baby and I were better off without him. We sat there planning until almost 2 in the morning. I was a freelance graphic designer, had been for the past 4 years, building up a decent client base, designing logos and websites for small businesses around Portland. I had savings, not a lot, but enough to be okay for a while. I had health insurance through the freelancers union. Jenna offered her spare bedroom if I needed it, but I wanted to try making it work in my own place first. Colette, who worked in HR, talked me through maternity leave options for self-employed people and disability insurance. They helped me see that while this was terrifying, it was not impossible. That night, after they finally went home, and I was alone in my apartment, I blocked Derek's number. I blocked him on every social media platform, deleted every photo of us together from my phone, took down the framed pictures from my walls. I did not do it out of anger. I did it out of necessity, like amputating a limb to save the body. He had chosen to leave, and I was going to let him stay gone. I made a promise to myself and to the baby growing inside me that I would not just survive this, I would build something better than what I had lost. The next morning I woke up with swollen eyes and a strange sense of clarity. I opened my laptop and updated my portfolio website, adding my newest designs and raising my rates by 25%. If I was going to do this alone, I needed to value my work properly. Needed to stop undercharging, because I felt guilty about asking for what I was worth. I sent out emails to 3 potential clients I'd been too scared to approach before pitching my services with a confidence I had to fake at first, but that started feeling real as I typed. Within a week, I had landed 2 of those 3 clients, both of them bigger projects than I usually took on, with budgets that made my savings account significantly less scary. I moved through those early days in a kind of focused trance, working. During the hours when morning sickness was not too bad, sleeping when exhaustion took over, attending my first prenatal appointment alone, and hearing my baby's heartbeat for the first time with no one to share it with, except the kind nurse who squeezed my hand when she saw my face. I started looking at 2-bedroom apartments, something I had not been able to afford before, but that my new client work would make possible. I needed space for a nursery, needed to build a real home for the 2 of us. I found a place in southeast Portland, nothing fancy, but with good light, and a small backyard, and landlords who did not mind a baby. The rent was $600 more than my current place, which terrified me, but I signed the lease anyway, trusting that I would make it work because I had to. During that first month, mutual friends would occasionally mention Derek in passing awkward little comments about seeing him with Shayna at some bar or restaurant. I would nod and change the subject, genuinely uninterested in his new life. I was too busy building my own. I joined an online support group for single mothers by choice, even though my situation was not exactly by choice. But those women, they understood what it meant to prepare for a baby alone, and their advice was practical and grounded and exactly what I needed. My design blog, which I had neglected for months, suddenly became a priority. I started posting regularly about my process, sharing before and after shots of my projects, writing about design theory and color psychology. It was partly marketing and partly therapy, a way to process everything I was going through by focusing on work I loved. The blog started getting traction, shares from other designers, comments from potential clients. One post about designing for sustainable brands got picked up by a small Portland lifestyle magazine and featured in their online edition. That feature changed everything. Within days, I had a dozen new inquiries, including one from a sustainable clothing company called Earthwear that wanted a complete rebrand. Their budget was 3 times what I usually charge for that kind of work. I spent a week on the proposal, researching their values and their market and their competitors, crafting a pitch that I knew was the best work I had ever done. When they accepted it, I cried happy tears for the first time since my birthday party. By the time I was 12 weeks pregnant, officially in the 2nd trimester, I was making more money than Derek had at his marketing job. That fact felt important. Somehow proof that boring Harper, who wanted marriage and babies, could also build a successful career and support a family and be enough all on her own. I started showing just slightly a small curve that I could hide under loose shirts, but that I saw every morning in the mirror. I would stand there sideways, hand on my belly, talking to my daughter about the life we were going to have. The Earthwear rebrand consumed my days in the best way. I designed a new logo, a complete color palette, patterns for their fabric prints, templates for their website and social media. I poured everything into it, all my creativity and skill, and the fierce determination to prove I was not useless, I was not boring, I was not less than. When I presented the final designs in a video call with their team, they were silent for a long moment, and I thought I had failed. Then the founder started crying and said it was exactly what they had dreamed of, but had not known how to articulate. They launched the rebrand on their social media in late August, tagging me as the designer. Within hours it was being shared, and reshared design blogs were picking it up. People were commenting about how fresh and authentic it felt. My inbox exploded with new client requests. I had to start turning work down, referring people to other designers, because I simply did not have enough hours in the day. For the first time in my freelance career, I was not worried about money. I was worried about having too much work, which was a problem I was happy to have. I ran into Marcus at a coffee shop one afternoon in early September. I was almost 4 months along, wearing a loose sweater that hid most of my bump. He looked uncomfortable when he saw me, like he was not sure whether to acknowledge me or pretend he had not noticed me in line. But I smiled at him a real smile and asked how he was doing. We ended up sitting together for 20 minutes, talking about normal things, work and the weather, and a concert we both wanted to see. Then carefully, like he was testing thin ice, Marcus mentioned Derek. He said he wanted to apologize for not speaking up at the party, for not defending me more strongly. I told him there was nothing to apologize for, that it was not his responsibility to manage Derek's choices. Marcus looked relieved, then guilty, then like he wanted to say something, but was not sure he should. Finally he said, "Things are not going well for him, I thought you should know." I waited, not asking, letting him decide whether to continue. He told me that Shayna had dumped Derek after 3 weeks. Apparently she had been seeing multiple people, and Derek was just one option among many. He told me Derek had lost his job at the marketing firm for showing up drunk to a client meeting. He told me Derek had moved back in with his parents in Beaverton, that he was depressed and drinking too much and asking about me constantly through mutual friends. Marcus said Derek wanted to reach out but was too ashamed that he knew he had made the biggest mistake of his life. I listened to all of this and felt nothing but a kind of distant pity, like hearing about the troubles of someone I used to know a long time ago. I said honestly, I hope he gets help. I hope he figures out what he really wants, but that is not my concern anymore. Marcus nodded, slowly studying my face like he was trying to figure out how I had become this person, this calm and certain version of Harper. He said, I looked good, happy, and I realized with surprise that I was happy, genuinely happy in a way I had not been even before the breakup. We said goodbye, and I walked home to my new apartment, the bigger one, with the nursery I had spent the weekend painting a soft yellow colour. I had put up shelves and filled them with books, bought a rocking chair from a vintage store and refinished it myself, hung handmade decorations that Colette and Jenna had helped me create. The space was coming together, turning into a home for my daughter and me. I sat in the rocking chair that evening, hand on my belly, feeling her move for the first time, these tiny flutters, like butterfly wings. I had a prenatal appointment the next week, where I found out I was having a girl information. The ultrasound tech gave me with a smile, while I cried, happy tears, alone in that darkened room. A girl. I was having a daughter. I started thinking about names, making lists in a notebook, trying them out loud to see how they sounded. I landed on Riley, a name that felt strong and independent and exactly right. Riley Harper, because she would take my last name, would be mine in every way that mattered. The sustainable clothing company wanted to do a feature on me for their blog, an interview about my design process and philosophy. During that interview, I talked about authenticity and staying true to your values and building something meaningful rather than something flashy. I did not mention the breakup or the pregnancy, but somehow those experiences informed every word I said. When the interview was published, it got shared even more widely than the rebrand had been. design students started emailing me asking for advice. Small businesses reached out wanting to work with me specifically. I raised my rates again, started being more selective about projects built in time for doctors, appointments, and rest, and preparing for the baby. My mother visited and cried when she saw the nursery, so proud of how I was handling everything, so excited to be a grandmother. She brought bags of baby clothes and offered to come stay with me for the first month after Riley was born. I accepted gratefully, no longer too proud to ask for help, understanding that strength was not doing everything alone, but knowing when to lean on people who loved you. I took maternity photos one Saturday afternoon in October, hiring a photographer friend who shot me in the nursery and outside in the autumn light. I was 6 months along, very clearly pregnant, glowing with health and purpose. I posted one photo on my personal social media, not my professional accounts, just a simple shot of me in profile with my hands cradling my belly. I did not tag Derek, but we still had enough mutual friends that I knew he would probably see it eventually. I was not trying to hurt him. I was just documenting my life, my joy, my journey. 2 days later I got a text from an unknown number. It said simply, "You look happy." I stared at it for a long time, knowing it was Derek, knowing he had gotten a new phone or was texting from someone else's. I thought about responding, thought about telling him about Riley, thought about a lot of things. Instead, I blocked the number without replying. Whatever he was feeling, whatever regrets he was nursing, they were not my burden to carry anymore. I had my own life to focus on, my own future to build, but I should have known that blocking a number would not be enough to keep him away, not when he was drunk and desperate and drowning in the consequences of his own choices. It was a Friday night in mid-October, 2 months and 1 week after my birthday party. I was working late on a project, trying to finish before the deadline, Jenna staying over at my place like she often did on weekends. Around 11, I heard yelling from outside, loud and slurred and saying my name over and over. I looked out my front window and saw Derek on my lawn, stumbling and barely able to stand screaming my name at the dark sky like I was somewhere up there instead of 20 feet away behind glass and walls. Neighbours' lights were turning on, curtains twitching. I watched him for a moment. This man I had almost married, reduced to this desperate version of himself. Jenna came up beside me and said, "Want me to call the cops?" I shook my head. For reasons I did not entirely understand, I needed to handle this myself. I went outside, pulling my cardigan tight around my visible pregnancy, Jenna right behind me, even though I had asked her to stay inside. The October night was cold, my breath making clouds in the air. Derek saw me and fell to his knees on the grass, which was wet with dew, soaking his jeans immediately. Up close, he looked terrible. His face was puffy and red, his eyes bloodshot, his clothes rumpled like he had been wearing them for days. He smelled like whiskey and desperation. He started talking words tumbling over each other in a slurred rush. He said he had made the biggest mistake of his life. He said Shayna meant nothing, had never meant anything, that I was the only woman he had ever truly loved. He said he saw my photo, the pregnancy photo I had posted, and realised what he had lost. Wait, he knew I was pregnant. I looked down at myself, my bump obvious under the sweater, and understood that he thought the baby was someone else's, that I had moved on and found someone new in the 2 months since he left. I almost laughed at the irony. He kept talking, saying he had been drinking every day since we broke up, that he could not sleep, that he had lost his job and his apartment and his self-respect. He said if I would just take him back, he would marry me tomorrow, would be the man I deserved, would spend the rest of his life making up for what he did at my birthday party. He was crying now, actual tears running down his face, his hands reaching for me even though I stood well out of range. I looked at this man on his knees in my yard and felt nothing but a deep, tired sadness. Not for what we had lost, but for who he had become, for the path he had chosen that had led him here. I said gently, like talking to a child, "Derek, you need help, not me. Professional help. Therapy, maybe rehab. You need to go home." My hand had moved unconsciously to my belly protective, and his eyes followed the movement. Something flickered across his face, confusion maybe, or the beginning of understanding. But then the alcohol took over again, and his face twisted with anger. He stumbled to his feet, swaying, and said viciously, "You think you are better than me now. You were nothing before me. I made you interesting. I made you worth knowing." The words were meant to hurt, meant to cut me down, meant to make me feel small and useless and boring again. But they bounced off me like rain off glass. I knew my worth now. I had proven it to myself in 1,000 small ways over the past 2 months. Jenna stepped forward, her phone already out, and said loudly, "I am calling the police if you do not leave right now." Derek looked at her, seemed to really see her for the first time, and some part of his brain that was still functioning realized how bad this looked. Him drunk on my lawn, yelling at a pregnant woman, neighbours watching. His face flushed with what might have been shame, and he stumbled backward, cursing under his breath, calling me names I will not repeat. He turned and staggered toward his car, which was parked crooked at the curb half on the sidewalk. Jenna yelled, "Do not even think about driving," and threatened to call the cops for real this time. Derek flipped her off, but pulled out his phone, presumably calling for a ride. We stood there watching until an Uber arrived 15 minutes later, making sure he actually got in and left. Only then did I realize I was shaking, not from fear, but from adrenaline and the strangeness of seeing him like that. We went back inside and I sat on my couch, Jenna making me tea. I did not drink, both of us silent. She finally said, "Are you going to tell him about the baby?" And I shook my head firmly. No. He had walked away from us before he even knew we existed. He had called me useless and boring and not worth his time. He did not get to come back now, drunk and desperate, and claim rights to a child he had already rejected. Riley was mine. This life was mine. He had no place in it. I realized something important that night, sitting in my apartment with my best friend and my daughter moving inside me. I did not need closure from Derek because I had already given it to myself. His apology, his regret, his breakdown, none of it changed anything, or healed anything, or made what he did okay. I had already moved past him, already built something new from the wreckage of that birthday party. His pain was his own to deal with. I had enough to handle preparing for motherhood and running a business and building the life I actually wanted. Over the following weeks, I heard through Marcus that Derek had checked himself into a 30-day rehab program, that he was finally getting therapy, that his parents were helping him get back on his feet. I hoped it was true, not because I wanted him back, or because I forgave him, but because I genuinely wished for him to be healthy and whole, even if that health and wholeness happened far away from me and Riley. Marcus stopped mentioning him after that, respecting the boundary I had drawn, and our friendship returned to normal, casual coffee shop conversations that did not include my ex. I focused on work and nesting and preparing. At 7 months pregnant, I was huge and tired and more excited than I had ever been. I finished the last projects I would take before maternity leave, setting up auto-responses and referring new inquiries to trusted colleagues. My design blog continued to grow, but I stopped updating it regularly, prioritizing rest and baby preparation over content creation. The internet would still be there after Riley was born. Jenna threw me a baby shower in November, just close friends and family, nothing like the big birthday party. We played silly games and ate too much cake, and I opened gifts while crying at everyone's generosity. My mother brought a handmade quilt she had been working on for months, each square a different pattern in yellows and greens. Colette gave me a gift certificate for a meal delivery service for after the baby came practical and thoughtful. No one mentioned Derek. It was like he had been erased from the story of my life, which in all the ways that mattered, he had been. At 8 months, I was on modified bed rest, not because anything was wrong, but because my body needed to slow down. I spent my days reading parenting books and organising the nursery. For the 100th time, and talking to Riley about everything and nothing. I told her about her grandmother, who could not wait to meet her, about her godmother Jenna, who had already promised to spoil her rotten about the life we were going to have together. I told her she was wanted and loved, and that we were going to be just fine. Riley came 3 days before her due date in the early morning hours of a cold December day. Labour was long and hard, and everything the books said it would be, but when they finally placed her on my chest, still covered in vernix and screaming her tiny lungs out, I understood what people meant when they said it was worth it. She was perfect. 7 pounds, 4 ounces of perfect. She had my nose and my chin, and eyes that would probably change colour, but that right now were dark and alert and looking right at me. My mother was there, had been there through the whole labour, holding my hand and wiping my forehead and telling me I was strong when I did not feel strong at all. Jenna arrived an hour after Riley was born, bringing flowers and crying happy tears, taking 1,000 photos that I would treasure forever. Colette came that evening with practical gifts like nipple cream and extra large overnight pads, the kind of stuff no one tells you about, but that you desperately need. The 3 of them, my chosen family, were all I needed. The first weeks were brutal in the way that early motherhood always is. I did not sleep more than 2 hours at a time. My body hurt in new and creative ways. Breastfeeding was way harder than anyone had warned me about. Riley cried for reasons I could not always figure out, but underneath the exhaustion and frustration was this profound joy, this sense of rightness that I had never experienced before. She was mine, I was hers. We were a family, complete and whole, exactly as we were. My mother stayed for 3 weeks, cooking and cleaning and holding Riley so I could shower or nap, or just sit in silence for 10 minutes. When she finally went home, I cried like a baby myself, terrified of being alone with this tiny human who depended on me for everything. But I figured it out, the way millions of mothers before me had figured it out. I learned Riley's cries, learned her rhythms, learned to trust my instincts, even when I had no idea what I was doing. I took a full 3 months of maternity leave, something I could afford because of the work I had done before Riley was born. I did not check email, did not take client calls, did not update my blog or social media, beyond occasional photos of Riley's tiny feet or hands, never her face. This time was sacred, protected just for us. I walked her around the neighbourhood in her stroller, pointing out trees and dogs and clouds, narrating the world to her even though she could not understand yet. When Riley was 6 weeks old, I ran into Derek's mother at the grocery store. I had Riley in the baby carrier against my chest, her head resting on my shoulder, and I was trying to one-hand a shopping cart while grabbing yogurt. She saw me and froze her eyes, going from my face to the baby and back again. I watched her do the math, watched her realize the timeline, watched, understanding dawn that this was her son's child. She opened her mouth like she was going to say something, ask something, maybe demand something. I looked at her calmly and said, "She is happy and healthy and loved. That is all you need to know." Then I walked away, done with that conversation before it could start. I heard later through the friend grapevine that she had told Derek that there had been some big confrontation, that he had wanted to establish paternity and get custody rights, but he never contacted me directly, never filed anything legal, and after a few weeks the gossip died down. I think some part of him knew, even drunk and broken as he had been, that he had forfeited any claim to us when he walked out of that birthday party. Or maybe his lawyer told him he had no case, that voluntarily abandoning a pregnant partner and refusing all contact was not a good look in family court. Whatever the reason, he stayed away, and I was grateful. Riley deserved better than a father who only wanted her because he was lonely and regretful, who would always wonder if she was the trap that tied him down. At 4 months postpartum, I started taking on small projects, again, just a few hours a week, while Riley napped, easing back into work. My rates had climbed even higher, during my absence my reputation growing through word of mouth, and that viral rebrand I'd done for Earthware. I could afford to be choosy, to only take work that excited me, to build a schedule around Riley's needs rather than the other way around. I hired a part-time nanny for 2 mornings a week, giving me focused time to work, while knowing Riley was safe and cared for. My design blog became something different when I returned to it. I wrote about being a single working mother, about building a business around a baby's schedule, about the guilt and joy and terror and pride of doing it alone. Those posts resonated even more than my design content, had mothers everywhere commenting that they felt seen and understood. Brands started reaching out, wanting to work with me specifically because of that authenticity, that willingness to be real about the hard parts. Riley was 6 months old, sitting up and eating solid foods and laughing at everything, when I realized I had not thought about Derek in weeks. He had become part of my past, a chapter that had closed someone I used to know. The note he had written, the one that said I was useless and deserved better. I had saved it at first, not sure why, but one day I was cleaning out drawers and found it, read those words again, and felt nothing. I threw it away, just tossed it in the trash with junk mail and old receipts, and did not think about it again. What he had meant as an insult had become true in a way he never intended. I did deserve better, better than a partner who would humiliate me publicly, better than someone who ran when life got real, better than a love that was conditional on me staying small and undemanding. I had found better not in another person, but in myself, in my capacity to build a life worth living, in my ability to be enough for my daughter and for me. The life Derek had called boring, the one with marriage and babies and stability, turned out to be rich and full and more meaningful than any amount of excitement or adventure. Riley was the best thing that had ever happened to me. The birthday party, the public rejection, the humiliation that had felt like the end of my world had actually been the beginning of something better. If Derek had not left, I would have married him. I would have had Riley with a partner who resented her existence. I would have spent years trying to make myself smaller, less boring, more acceptable. Instead, I was free. Free to be exactly who I was, to want what I wanted, without apology, to build a family that looked different from the traditional picture, but that was no less valid or beautiful. Riley would grow up watching her mother run a business and pay bills and handle crises and celebrate victories. She would learn that you do not need a partner to be complete, that family comes in many forms, that strength sometimes looks like moving forward alone. I thought sometimes about that moment at the birthday party, standing there with that note in my hands, and everyone watching. I thought about the choice I had made to smile instead of cry, to stay calm instead of falling apart. That choice had set the tone for everything that came after. It had shown me who I could be when everything fell apart, and that person was strong stronger than I had known, braver than I had believed, more capable than anyone had given me credit for. Now, almost a year after that terrible birthday, I hold my daughter in the apartment we have made into a home, and I feel nothing but gratitude. Grateful for the breakup that freed me, grateful for the pregnancy that gave me, Riley grateful for the pain that taught me my own strength. Derek did me a favour when he left, though he will never understand that. He gave me the chance to become the person I was always meant to be, the mother Riley deserved, the woman I had been too afraid to become when I was trying to make someone else happy. If you are watching this, and you have ever been told you are too much, or not enough, too boring or too demanding, too needy or too independent, I want you to know something. The person who cannot love you as you are is not the right person. The relationship that requires you to shrink is not the right relationship. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you is actually the best thing. You just cannot see it yet because you are still in the middle of the pain. So here is my question for you, and I really want you to answer in the comments below. Have you ever had a moment that felt like the end of everything, but turned out to be your beginning? A breakup or job loss or failure that redirected your life in a better direction? Tell me your story. I read every comment, and I promise you sharing it helps not just you, but everyone who reads it and realizes they are not alone. If this story resonated with you, if you needed to hear that you can survive the worst and come out stronger, please hit that like button. Subscribe to this channel because I share more stories about resilience and growth and finding strength in unexpected places. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it, someone who is going through their own breakup or heartbreak or moment of feeling useless and small. Your share might be exactly what they need to hear today. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being here. I hope you find the courage to walk away from anything that makes you feel less than you are. I hope you build a life so full and rich that the people who left realize too late what they lost. And I hope you find peace, the kind of peace that comes from knowing you are exactly enough exactly as you are. Take care of yourselves out there, and remember that sometimes the best revenge